Good morning. Good to see you. Thank you for coming today on this sunny, beautiful day. Spend some time indoors, listening hopefully to the Dharma. It's been a while since I've been up here. I've been pretty busy with my sitting group, the Windsor Zen Group. My teaching, I teach Spanish in elementary school. I teach martial arts as well. And when I'm here, I think a little about some of the things that happened, because I started here 1979 or 1980. And for the first 30 years, probably, I practiced pretty steadily here. So it was, I would look around the Zen, I would know everyone, pretty much, except a few new people. Today, it's not quite the same. So I thought I'd give you a little background and maybe say a little about, just for the newer people, a little of the history and legacy of the Zen Center. It's quite interesting that Roshin Chinko and his family came up and just almost from scratch just built this place. And over the years, right, everyone has contributed in some way, left their mark, left their contributions, we could say. I just think of all the things that have happened and how it's changed so much. I was down in the lower building today, and in the old days, we just, it's just shacks thrown together pretty much. And now it's, you look in, it's like a beautiful art museum. So it's very wonderful. And I'm very appreciative of all the work that's gone into it. Keep maintaining this place, the residents and the work they're doing. It's really wonderful to have this as a sanctuary, you could say, not to escape from, but to regenerate. I think back, there was a time we sanded this whole zendo by hand, whole thing. There was a time we were sitting sesshin, eating orioki. Kannon was here, and we had cushions in front of Kannon. I was sitting over there, and the building started rocking. And I looked across the room. I think it was Joseph from Scotland was sitting here, the big smile on his face. Later, in the closing circle, Noel, I think it was, said, I didn't have a smile. She was sitting right at the base of the Kannon statue, and she was afraid it was going to fall on her. So there's great history that's gone on here. In the early days, we had many people coming, many well-known teachers. Just to name a few, it was Dae Sanzin, the Korean teacher Roshi trained with for many years after Suzuki Roshi's death, did retreats, Kido chanting retreats. Chogyam Trungpa, of course, we had a stupa. Bernie Glassman, who founded the Zen Peacemakers Order. He came and gave a talk, and his talk was, well, give me a few questions. So we gave him 3 or 4 questions, and he just wove his talk around those questions. Ishimaru Roshi came once or twice, who was, you may know of him, he's kind of known as Bodhidharma of Europe and has a background. I was a student of Kodo Sawaki, and he came in. He had his main temple in France, and he came in and he was speaking like 3 or 4 languages, Japanese, English, French, and I recall he just walked over the zabutons, like a samurai. And he said an interesting thing. He said, I really respect Muslims because they bow to the ground. And that was really an interesting statement. Other teachers, have come through, and now, of course, we've cemented a relationship with Japan, with Sotoshi, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful that the Japanese monks can come. We can have that exchange happening. But just to know that the history was different in the early days, so I just wanted to make that point. This room, this zendo, has seen a lot of changes. Dharma has still been strong. but there's been changes that have happened over the years. Having said that, I know some of you don't know me, and I'd just like to say a little about myself. See what I have here in my notes. Yeah. Like I said, I have a Zen group. I live in Windsor, which is just north of Santa Rosa. I've lived there maybe 25 years, and I'm a retired bilingual elementary school teacher. I started teaching Aikido. I started training maybe 20 something years ago and started teaching the children in my classes. I just felt like, it would be a good thing for me to do. And I've been doing that now for 15, 16 years, and it's kind of grown. It's just been kind of a love of mine, and I have teach 4 classes now, have over 30 students with. So it's kind of cool to see that you can just. I hadn't ever expected to really do anything with it. I just wanted to teach, and it's just grown. So I think when we're really connected to what we're doing, not to earn money, to sustain ourselves financially in any way, but just to let our passions guide us, let our inner voice guide us. Additionally, my Zen group, I'll mention that we sit 6 days a week. It's mainly online. We sit 3 mornings, 7, and then 2 evenings we sit, and then Sunday we sit. And usually it's online, but once or twice a month we'll meet in person, do a hybrid. We'll have a hybrid sit here in Santa Rosa. But in addition to that, I've been doing outreach work in Mexico, and I've told a few of you about it. But just for those of you who haven't heard it, I go down to Tijuana mainly 3 or 4 times a year. Actually, it's been 4 or 5, but and I stay at an orphanage. Lately, I've been staying at an orphanage, Casa Hogar de los Niños, and it was recommended to me by a student here who's part of our sitting group. She had volunteered with her husband way back in the early 80s. And so I've kind of built a relationship with them, and I teach there, and I teach classes on whatever, as an elementary school teacher, I can bring a lot to the table, but I've been doing mindfulness and martial arts and self-defense with the kids. And it's really beautiful to see the little guys. And interesting that they are they'll really try to sit, and I was surprised that they would enjoy it that much. Sometimes it's not so easy, they're bringing a lot of karma into the setting. So we've had fights break out and different things, but generally they're really sweet. And I've also been doing classes in migrant shelters. I partnered with a comedor, which is a community kitchen in a marginalized section of Tijuana. They started off as a free kitchen, mainly started by Central American refugees. And then it's kind of evolved into a free school. So there's been activists coming from the States and from Tijuana offering different classes free. And I was in a pilot program and met a number of the people. We've made some bonds, and that's been neat. And then teaching at an Aikido dojo in Tijuana as well. So, we have this impression of Tijuana as being a den of inequity, which some parts are. But there's a really beautiful side to the city, a quiet, side that's very much like Mexico in many ways. So I've been traveling a lot. I went to my second year of college, I spent in Mexico, in a town called Cholula, which is outside of Mexico City. And I've seen the growth of Buddhism in Mexico, and I've always been interested in doing work there. And in the early days, there was very little Buddhism, but now it's really grown. The Dalai Lama, he's made visits, and Tibetan Buddhism is pretty common. But in Tijuana, there's very little Buddhism. There's one group, maybe a very small group of Thich Nhat Hanh, and another smaller Tibetan group, no Zen that I know. But actually, Tijuana being on the border there's an affluent side to it, and even some beautiful shopping centers and cultural centers. And so there's much more than we think of. And I know we do think of the violence, and that is a real thing, when you travel around, you see the National Guard riding around with their rifles in these open trucks, I went to one shelter and there were the cops, I think they were National Guard with their automatic rifles, right out in front of the shelter, because they sometimes harass the shelters. At the orphanage one time, I showed up and here was a soldier right outside the the director's door, and it turned out they were housing the National Guard because the cartels had been extorting money and killed someone in that neighborhood. So there is, but it's not like they've cut back on the kidnapping. There's not so much kidnapping now, but still you have to kind of be safe, be careful. So I wanted to say that I'm looking at it more as an extension of our practice here, but more, we might say, socially engaged in a sense. And it's wonderful that we have this connection. I can come here, we can come here. But it feels like, I can bring the teachings, Roshi's teachings, Suzuki Roshi's, Buddha's teachings, to a place which really, just doesn't know much. And the people that are eager to learn. The last trip I made was I gave a workshop at a library, little community library, really sweet. There were about 20, mostly older women in a small book club. And there's a woman who's been helping me, Aurora, and her mother is part of that club. So we gave a little workshop, and the women really loved it. And it was wonderful seeing them doing kinhin together. Some of them have trouble sitting on the floor, but they did well, and it was good. So I'm going back on this Tuesday for another 6 days, and we'll do another workshop there. So I wanted to read a little, and I know this is sort of in honor of Suzuki Roshi, because we're doing a study group on Zen mind, beginner's mind. So I should say, when I first came here, I was a student at Sonoma State, and Roshi was teaching the psychology department. And the structure of the class was we had I think it was twice a week we met, pretty sure. We would read a chapter of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. That was our class at Sonoma State. And then we'd come up here one day. So it was the academic and the actual practice. It was nice. And we could earn an A if we did a sesshin. So that was interesting grading system. So that was my first real study of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I think we did a study group with it. I did a group online in Spanish, we studied, and similarly, we did one chapter at a time. And then in my sitting group, we did it for Ongos. We took every morning reading, we would do a chapter and worked it out. We did the whole book. And it's sort of inexhaustible, you know, you'll recall things from it, phrases and sections, but there's always something, and there's so much depth to the book that you're always rediscovering, you know, so it's really wonderful. So in light of that, I'd like to read a little, this is a story from Suzuki Roshi's life before he came to the United States. And this is from Crooked Cucumber, his biography. And I'd recommend the book if you haven't read it. So some of you may be familiar with this. Okay. So the story is that he was hired as as an assistant to a woman named Nona Ransom. I think that was her first name, Nona. She was a very well-known English teacher, originally from England, or I think so. She was from a Quaker family that, as far as I know, Quakers didn't believe in, or don't believe in figures of deities or Buddha or God, you know. And she was very prim and proper. She had been the tutor to the children of the former emperor and the empress, and then she moved to Japan. She even tutored the founder of Judo Kano. But she was very prim and proper. So what happened was she had a lovely statue, wood-carved statue of Buddha in a tokonoma, sort of like this. But she sort of disrespected. She left her shoes by the Buddha statue. Her guests would come in and leave cigarette butts and different things. And this really offended Suzuki Roshi. And he started offering incense, and he would move her shoes over and clean up and do bows to the Buddha. And she couldn't understand. She made fun of him. And so this is the story. So he told her why he related to the statue with such respect. And he told her about Shakyamuni Buddha and Buddhahood. He said that such a statue reminds us that the way is everywhere and that we ourselves are Buddha, so that when we offer incense to the statue, we're recognizing our own true nature, the true nature of all that is. The nature of our existence is not something we can know or remember so easily. Buddha is not a god or a being who can be easily described. You can't put your finger on what Buddha is, but Buddhism does have various teachings. There is, for instance, the teaching about the three bodies of Buddha, the sublime, indescribable Dharmakaya Buddha, beyond any particular experience. The first principle of religion, the Sambhogakaya Buddha, the subtle body of rapture or grace, the fruit of practice, and the Nirmanakaya Buddha, the historical person who awakened under the Bodhi tree. He was a person just like everyone else who attained something wonderful that is possible for others to attain, for both women and men. Miss Ransom was amazed. It was not at all what she had expected. She thanked him for his explanation and praised his command of the English language. She said she had no idea that there was such profundity in Buddhism, such realization of the divinity of the individual. She was not only affected by Shinryu's explanation, but was also impressed with his composure and his delivery. After that, there was no more teasing. Miss Ransom became very quiet for a few days. And then one afternoon, Shinryu walked into the sitting room and saw that the shoes were gone from the tokonoma. And there was a fine arrangement of beautiful flowers by the wooden Buddha statue. She asked if if he would tell her more about Buddhism and explain Buddhist practice. He showed her how to clean, or how he would clean the tokonoma, and together they went out and got some candles, incense, and an incense bowl, even a little bell, and they turned the tokonoma into an altar. He taught her how to sit zazen. She made the acquaintance of Buddhist professors at Komazawa who could speak some English, and she set about studying Buddhism. Shinryu studied English all the harder and was pleased at what had happened. They were freely trading in the knowledge of the respective religious traditions. The wall between them had fallen, and she'd come walking through that opening. This affair of the Buddha statue was momentous for Suzuki, literally changing the course of his life. He would later call it the turning point of his life. He had seen Miss Ransom's total ignorance of Buddhism. Her beginner's mind was not an obstacle, but had made it possible for her to understand more clearly. He talked to Miss Ransom about his dream to go abroad, admitting that he had become fairly disgusted with the state of Buddhism and the attitude of many priests in Japan. I felt very good. I developed some confidence in our teaching and in the thought that I could help Western people understand Buddhism. For Japanese people, it's fairly difficult to understand Buddhism in its true sense, because the tradition has been so often mistaken and misunderstood. It's difficult to change misunderstandings once we have them. But for people who don't know anything about Buddhism, it's like painting on white paper. It's much easier to give them the right understanding. I think that the experience I had with Miss Ransom resulted in my coming to America. So it's really a lovely episode. And to see how she could change, how he did it, just by his constancy and not saying anything, but just doing. So I think it's very instructive for us. I wanted to read a little. I think we just finished up the section on posture in the study group. I wasn't able to make it this last session, but I wanted to read this for you. And really, it's just basic, but we think of it as basic, and then we might miss some of it, And even going back and looking at this now, I realize, I kind of glossed over this. So the most important thing in taking the zazen posture is to keep your spine straight. Your ears and your shoulders should be on one line. Relax your shoulders. Push up towards the ceiling with the back of your head. And you should pull your chin in. So tuck it in, right? When your chin is tilted up, you have no strength in your posture. You're probably dreaming. Also, to gain strength in your posture, press your diaphragm down towards your hara, or lower abdomen. Okay, so we can think of that, what does that feel like? The hara is below the diaphragm. So, this will help you maintain your physical and mental balance. When you try to keep this posture, at first you may find some difficulty breathing naturally, but when you get accustomed to it, you'll be able to breathe naturally and deeply. Your hand should form the cosmic mudra. If you put your left hand on top of your right, the middle joints of your middle fingers together, and touch your thumbs lightly together, as if you held a piece of paper between them, your hands will make a beautiful oval. Okay, so that's something I glossed over because I would always I would have my mudra where my tips of my fingers were extending over my palm. But if you line your middle knuckles up, it extends over and it's more flat. Okay, so, and you can look down and adjust your mudra, right, before you sit. And then you have a nice solid mudra. Hold your arms freely and easily, slightly away from your body, as if you held an egg under each arm without breaking it. Okay. So in our sitting, we have this beautiful opportunity to become one with the ground, right? Our lower body just, in a sense, melts into the ground, so there's no separation. This is true rootedness. Okay, we're in this stable posture, either in a chair or on the floor, but we also have this freedom, this spaciousness, and with our mudra, we're bringing it together. You know, I think if we looked at it neurologically, all the points in our brain are like intertwined somehow. Maybe there have been studies about it, but I'm sure it's fusing the hemispheres and the parts of our brain as we sit. And so it's very, over the thousands of years, this posture has been developed. But it's not for everyone, it's not easy for everyone. But when we invest in it, this is when we see its power in our lives. So the mudra is very important. It's centering us. You know, this is the seat of consciousness, the hara. So try to feel that. Like in the martial arts, we emphasize the hara. It's very important. Tea ceremony is very, very important. So in our sitting, this is really experiencing firsthand non-duality. This is prajnaparamita and reaching the other shore in our practice, expressing that. I think it was in his chapter, he also said, we are both one and many, or one and two at the same time, right? And that's a fundamental, we might say, paradox. The middle way is that we go between this absolute and relative, you know. I mean, originally the middle way was speaking about Buddha choosing the path between aestheticism or self-denial, we might say, or overindulgence. But it also can apply to this middle way of going between our identity as a small self and this greater truth of who we are, which you might say is the absolute, right? How do we navigate that in our daily life? So, the world seems to be in a fairly difficult state. There's many people wanting to make America great again. But really, how do we recognize the greatness in ourselves? Discover that. How do we discover that inherent greatness? Whether we call it God or universe, Buddha nature, true self, creator, these are just labels and ideas. We need the direct experience of this greatness. This is what our Zazen affords us. This is to uncover our intrinsic treasure. In the Fukan Zazengi, at the end, the final line, Dogen, which are his recommendations. He first wrote his first writing, I believe, when he returned to Japan. At the end of the essay, he talks about following the model of the ancestors. You'll be assured to be a person like this. The treasure store will open of itself, and you will use it at will. So we have the word great. We find it a lot in our practice. In the morning, we chant Dai Zai Ge Da Buku, so on, which is the great robe of liberation. Great is the robe of liberation. We have Dai Hi Shin Dharani, the great compassionate Dharani. Dai Osho, after every teacher we say Dai Osho. Great teacher, the ancestors who have realized this greatness and brought it forth. Sometimes this great in Zen is translated as magnanimous, which implies a mind that is vast, open, generous. Dogen Zenji, in his instructions to the Zen cook, talks about three kinds of mind. The first is Kishin. Kishin is a joyful mind. We're joy to work and support the Sangha. It's a joyful spirit of gratefulness and buoyancy. The second mind is Roshin. In the same way that a parent cares for an only child, keep the three treasures in your mind. A parent, irrespective of poverty or difficult circumstances, loves and raises a child with care. How deep is love like this? Only a parent can understand it. Dogen Zenji continues to say, in the same manner, if you handle water, rice, or anything else, you must have the affectionate and caring concern of a parent. This is respecting all things. And the third one is Daishin. Magnanimous mind is like a mountain, stable and impartial, exemplifying the ocean. It is tolerant and views everything from the broadest perspective. Having a magnanimous mind means being without prejudice and refusing to take sides. I went back and read the essay and was surprised to see that that section was the very end of his essay. So it definitely was an important part and a message that he wanted to convey. They also have our vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. How are we going to do this? It's, the work of a lifetime. It's not that, can we do it? Is it possible? No, we just do it without expectation. So, doing. So maybe I'll say a little about the three marks of existence. So the first is suffering. There is suffering in the world. And it's probably helpful for us to see suffering as dukkha, which is things don't fit. You know, it's not harmonious. There's something out of place. Buddha first saw old age, death, old age, sickness, and death, right? All of these things are factors that we must deal with. We can't escape them. But how are we to navigate our life without creating more suffering around the pain, without running or pushing away or pulling to find a way to escape that? That's the middle way as well. The second is impermanence. You know, how many people are not able to deal? I'm not saying that we don't have financial difficulties, injustice in this society, but how many people can't tolerate the change? You know, I heard a program about the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States, how it's affected the middle class. You know, outsourcing all the jobs, and so many middle class people, men especially, lost their jobs or found new jobs, and wives had gone to work, and this has created all sorts of tension and difficulty. And so how has all of this exacerbated alienation and isolation? This is just one part of it, you know, but it's happening all over the world. But where is that deep connection that people could find, you know, in a spiritual realm? And then the third one is no self. So Buddha, in our chant of the Heart Sutra, Avalokiteshvara, clearly saw that all five conditions are empty. The skandhas, just like us, are impermanent. There's no fixed self. When they congeal, then we create a fixation on an idea of self. But our sitting, we see that the skandhas are transient, as is everything. So suffering, the pain, impermanence, and Atman, no self. So in our sitting and our practice, we have this opportunity to directly experience those three and to see our minds, to shine a light on our minds. So I wanted to just end with a final reading. And this is from Katsuzen, who came to help in the San Francisco Zen Center, was assistant to Suzuki Roshi. And I really like this writing. This is from a chapter called Returning to Silence. Actually, his book is called Returning to Silence, and this is the section called Returning to Silence. This is the end of it. You have to keep a certain genuineness in practice. This is always the target you have to aim at, and not discussing the teaching, how deep or shallow it is. But even though you keep this genuine practice, someone else may make it into a toy. That is human life. That's why from beginning to end, we have to focus on genuineness of practice. All we have to do is just sit, just come back to the silent world and the vastness of existence. This is just sitting. Even though you don't understand, this is Zazen. Then when you come back, there is total trust because you're silent. This is called right faith. Faith doesn't mean belief. You cannot believe anything. Right faith means you must just be there, soaking in the silence and the vastness of existence. This faith is called trust. Then when you really feel something through this practice, temporarily, we call it faith. To enter into this realm of faith is Zazen. Zazen isn't a method. If you think so, then Zazen becomes a toy. If you're going to use Zazen as a toy, it's not necessary to do Zazen. There are lots of other toys that are better. Those who do not have faith will not accept Zazen, however much they are taught. If you don't trust the silence and the vastness of existence, if you don't soak yourself in this realm, how can you trust yourself? How can you trust others? How can you deal with human life? No matter how long you try to study the sutras or Zen, you'll never understand. Even though you say, I understand, that understanding is not understanding. Without this trust, you don't understand. You don't understand. If you want to understand the sutras or Buddha's teachings, not as toys, but as a finger pointing at the moon, with your wholeheartedness, jump into the silence and the vastness of existence. Let the teaching really penetrate your skin, your muscle, and your bone. Then you can get a hint of where the real moon is, of what that real moon is. Don't expect too much through scriptures and words. Don't discuss superiority or inferiority. All we have to do is study the scriptures with wholeheartedness and jump into the silence and vastness of existence. At that time, the scriptures become light through which you can see many things in the darkness. Whatever it is, not only Zazen or Buddhist scriptures, but sports, music, or anything else. If you really devote yourself with wholeheartedness, you can learn many things. Nevertheless, if you really accept things totally on the basis of silence and vastness of existence, the beauty of your life blooms. The beauty of existence blooms. This understanding is completely beyond human speculation. So I'd like to close with that. I would just like to say, I'd like to invite you, since my group meets on Sundays, you're more than welcome to join us if you want to extend the practice during the week a little, or even during the week if the schedule, you can't make a sitting or something here online, or you're welcome to join us. And I'd also, if you haven't, or you aren't taking part in the study group, I really would encourage you to do that as well, because it's a great opportunity.
And Katsuzen, do you have a website for the Windsor group?
Yeah, we do, windsorzen.org, but it's not really updated. But I think maybe if you wanted to just contact the office and they could give you my email address. We have one Zoom link for all of them. Yeah. So we have maybe a couple minutes if anyone has a comment or question. Yeah, Mark.
This is actually not a question, but sort of an announcement. There's a show currently at the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art, which is extremely interesting, especially for us Buddhists. It's a traditional Tibetan Thangka artist who has combined his amazing technique with modern themes. And like I said, especially for us Buddhists, it's an extremely interesting show. Just wanted to point that out. It's free on Wednesdays, by the way.
Okay. That's the Sonoma Museum?
The Sonoma Valley Museum of Art.
Oh, all right. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much.